Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. We are closing out the month of February. It has come and gone and given us plenty to talk about here on the Penn State football beat, Penn State athletics beat. We did a lot of that on our first episode this week, joined by colleague Mark Brennan, fresh out of a couple press conferences here on campus with new running backs coach Stan Drayton, with athletics director Pat Kraft, our first chance hearing from Kraft since 2024. So we had a lot to break down there. We also broke down some of our time in Penn State football facilities last weekend during the Thon weekend. If you want to go back, we rehashed a lot of cool moments that we observed, some football-related takeaways as well from our trip to team facilities. That's all waiting for you back in the episode that dropped on Tuesday. We're closing out this week, closing out this month, and just to let you know, heading into a vacation period with this episode. You're going to hear from my colleagues Daniel Gallen and Tyler Calvaruso. Right now, we have some roster movement. We have some coaching staff movement to get to. We also have some winter workout updates as Penn State players take their next step toward what will ultimately be 2025 kickoff. We're going to get into that in just a second, but I am heading out, taking my family somewhere warm for a week to start out March. So next week, that first week of March, don't expect any new episodes here from the Lions 24/7 podcast. We'll pick it up after that. We'll be on the final stretch toward spring practice at that point. We'll also be nearing Pro Day, which is going to be a pretty big deal here in Penn State. We'll talk about why later on in this episode. But without further ado, let's get on Tyler Calvaruso and Daniel Gallen. And we welcome Daniel back. If you noticed, you hadn't heard from him a little bit lately over some of our conversation. He enjoyed a little bit of a getaway for himself to somewhere sunny and warm, got some spring training baseball. I'm going to do the same, taking the daughter to some Clearwater Phillies action to start out March. But Daniel, good to have you back. Sorry you got to deal with the rest of this winter up here in central Pennsylvania. And Tyler, always good to get you on board.
No, it's good. I don't think I've been on the podcast with Tyler in a long time. So this is a good way to get back into it. And hopefully we'll tide people over next week.
Calvaruso, what's going on?
I don't know, man. It's getting nicer out here. You're going down to Florida. Daniel's coming back. I feel left out, man.
Yeah, you were. I tell you all the time, take a freaking vacation, man. I know our readers don't want you to, but yeah, take some time. But let's get into a bunch because we do have plenty to kind of pack into this episode before we take that vacation time. And we'll begin with some really notable additions to this staff. And one's a promotion, one is an addition. We'll start with that addition, and it is Trace McSorley, a legendary figure for many here in the Nittany Lions football culture. A 3-year starter at quarterback, left this program as the all-time leader in passing yards and touchdowns accounted for, and wins by a starting quarterback. Helped lead the team to its last Big Ten championship in 2016, and to a Rose Bowl beyond that. Also won a New Year's Six Bowl during his career as well, down the Fiesta Bowl. And Trace McSorley, I think when everybody thinks about him and that kind of early breakout period for the James Franklin era, it's fond memories. People always talk about kind of the cachet that Trace had as a leader, some of those key moments where you got to step up and make something happen. He always seemed to have answers. And Daniel, I know you weren't around covering Trace McSorley during that time period. I got to follow his last 2 years on campus, but I think a lot of people would have told you then, including Trace, that he was going to be capable of coming back to a campus like this and coaching at this highest level of the game. He went and had an opportunity to play NFL football. He was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens in the 6th round. He ended up spending 3 seasons there, bounced around to a few other franchises, spent some time around the Penn State program last year on the practice field. We heard some good things about his positive influence, and now officially on board as the assistant quarterbacks coach working with Danny O'Brien. What do you make of this move, Daniel, in terms of James Franklin bringing in a guy who it's not too far down the rearview mirror? There's a lot of familiarity here. This is kind of a goodwill building thing for an offseason that's featured a lot of it for this program. And ultimately, how do you think it resonates in this room where you've got an established starter and a bunch of other guys who haven't really thrown the ball in college action?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting move, and I think it's one that has the potential to be a big positive for Penn State and their quarterbacks. Last March, McSorley was in State College for, I think, the NFHS, had an event, and he was the keynote speaker. And he said that he still wanted to give being an NFL quarterback a go, that he and his agent were still looking for opportunities. That never really came to pass over the course of last year. And so I think this is the logical next step in a career for him. Assistant quarterbacks coach. I think he's technically an analyst. So this is a good way for him to, put a, toe in the water, see what this looks like for him, see the type of impact he can make, and start his coaching career. But I think that when you talk about bringing this type of guy into this group, I mean, we talk about Drew Aller. He's someone who knows football. He's a football junkie. He knows NFL quarterbacks, all of the above. So he's someone who's going to be really, really familiar with Trace McSorley. And I think that he is someone who will embrace, a lot of those lessons that McSorley has, because, even though you can look at McSorley's NFL career and the numbers don't really stand out to you and, all of that stuff, you're still there. Not many people get the chance to say that. It's a very elite company. And so McSorley can bring that experience. He was around someone like Lamar Jackson, in an organization like the Ravens. I think he would have overlapped with James Urban, who's also an analyst now on staff, who was the quarterback coach with the Ravens for a while. So I think that he's someone who can bring a wealth of experience beyond just, I was the quarterback at Penn State. I did all this stuff. I know what you're going through. He can add a lot of different perspectives. And I think at this point that's something that can only be a positive for someone like Drew Aller, and younger guys like Ethan Grunkemeyer, Beckham Kritza, Jackson Smolik.
Yeah, great point in terms of this. This isn't the same Trace McSorley who left campus. He's gone. He's accrued more information. I think he's been in 5 different NFL quarterback rooms, working alongside professionals, working with different coaching minds. What worked, what didn't, what does he want to apply? We're going to learn more about that. And I will note there are a very small amount of people walking this planet who understand the day-to-day pressures of being the quarterback at an institution like Penn State University. Trace McSorley happens to be one of them. He also did that with national championship expectations. You want to talk about how things really revved up after that 2016 Big Ten championship run. You bring back Saquon Barkley, Mike Gesicki. It's a supporting cast there. He knows what it's like to be the quarterback with national championship expectations. They had that in 2017, fell a little shy, ultimately winning the Fiesta Bowl. Tyler, when we talk about the recruiting impact here, again, I'm not expecting kids who are in high school now to necessarily have the most vivid memories of, Trace McSorley throwing a game-winning touchdown pass in 2017 and Iowa City to win that matchup in a huge Big Ten showdown. But this is not a name that I think everyone's got to scramble and go to Google to figure out his relevance in terms of the college football world, and certainly here with the Nittany Lions. Based on what you're hearing thus far, based on what you are anticipating in the months ahead as Trace McSorley gets to meet and greet some of these recruits, what is the impact of this move in that realm for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, these kids might not remember some of Trace McSorley's highlights during his Penn State career, but the fact of the matter is he was an NFL draft pick. Doesn't take long to figure that one out. You add a guy to the staff who has that NFL experience and has carved out his path to the NFL as a player. That's always a big thing to sell on the recruiting trail. We first talked about that when Deion Barnes was kicking around on the step before he became the primary defensive line coach. I mean, just being able to sell, hey, look, I got to the NFL. I did what I had to do. Here's how I can help you get to that same place. That always carries a ton of weight. McSorley's young. He's energetic. He's from Virginia. That's a place Penn State recruits quite often. He's known in that area from his playing career, so that's a plus. I think when it comes to potential tangible results on the recruiting trail and potential tangible impact, you got to look more towards 27. Penn State has Troy Hume locked in 26. There's not a whole lot else going on at quarterback right now. And with these new recruiting rules, analysts are able to take on more of a role in recruiting. And I think McSorley has the personality to be a home run getting around these younger quarterback targets that Penn State has in the 27 and 28 classes. Again, NFL guy, knows what it takes to play the position at a high level, knows what it takes to play it at Penn State. I think about Peter Bork, who's a top 100 quarterback in the 27 class. He's Penn State's probably their top target at the position. And he was telling me that there was a ton of value when he last visited for a junior day in not only spending time with Danny O'Brien, but spending time around Ethan Grunkemeyer and Drew Aller, learning about what it's like to play Penn State quarterback and what it's like to be a Nittany Lion. McSorley could sell that probably even better than those guys, considering everything he's been through during his tenure with the program. So I think it has the potential to only be a positive for Penn State on the trail. I'm looking more towards the future when it comes to McSorley's direct quarterback recruiting impact. But again, it's a good move for Penn State, in my opinion. It's one that can only, I think, work in the right direction for James Franklin.
McSorley will turn 30 years old before next season. He's come a long way from a guy committed to James Franklin at Vanderbilt, where a lot of folks are saying this guy's got to play safety. He's a nice high school quarterback, but he's going to have to play safety at the next level. Now here he is, assistant quarterbacks coach at Penn State, and he can point to a lot of accomplishments at that position and a longer NFL career than I think a lot of people may have anticipated when he left campus. The other notable staff move here with a familiar name from his playing days, Dan Connor. We talked a lot about him, Daniel, back when Tom Allen took the Clemson job. We said, don't worry, there's still a very stabilizing presence in that linebacker room. Dan Connor, former All-American linebacker here with the Nittany Lions. He's been an analyst the last couple of seasons. And within that role, every time we went to practice, he appeared to be the linebackers coach. Every time you talk to a linebacker, they appeared to reference him as the linebackers coach with more of a head coach of the defense vibe for Tom Allen. And I anticipate that's what we're going to hear with Jim Knowles, because it's now set in stone. Linebackers coach is the title for Dan Connor. Again, this feels more like making it official, kind of like it did with Danny O'Brien last year when we knew he was already essentially operating in that role. But this is a guy that has done a lot. I mean, we know Trace McSorley's done a lot, but this is one of those Mount Rushmore type figures when you talk about LBU and that particular brand, Daniel. Now he's back here leading that room. He's got a long career at the NFL level he can point to with production too. So what do you make of his promotion?
Yeah, it's kind of like you said, it's something that we already knew, and it sort of is just being made official. I think you go back to the Jim Knowles introductory news conference when he ran down the position coaches who were already in place, and he mentioned Dan Connor. That was another signal beyond just what we were seeing on the practice field last year. But I think that in talking to players, there's just been really good feedback on Dan Connor and the type of coach he is and the type of presence he is. I mean, I think about when Curtis Jacobs was here and Connor wasn't in an on-field role yet. It's when the analysts were still relegated to being off-field behind the scenes that, Jacobs would talk all the time about how much he enjoyed talking with Connor, how just having that resource there, being able to ask him all these different things and get advice for him was very valuable for Jacobs during the later part of his career when Connor was here. And so I think that Connor is just someone who has that gravitas. We've seen how he conducts himself as a coach on the field. He gets through to his players. He, I think, is very clear and concise with what he wants them to do, how he wants them to do it. And I think that that's going to be a big benefit for Penn State. I think the fact that he's been here for a couple of years, so he knows these players, he's familiar with them, he's been hands-on with them for a year, that can only help. And it's something that when you talk about installing a new system under Jim Knowles, this is something that I think can have a big benefit having him in place.
Connor was a third-round pick in the NFL draft, spent 6 seasons in the league, but he has had to work his way up the coaching ladder. Trace McSorley kind of gets a nice start here in a pretty sweet situation. A top-of-the-line power conference team, national title contender. You had Dan Connor being a high school head coach. You had him being the defensive coordinator at Division III college, Widener, over in Chester, Pennsylvania, and then coming to Penn State as an analyst. A lot of behind-the-scenes work, not even getting to work on the field during practice sessions initially. And now that is his room. What does it mean for linebacker recruits, Tyler Calvaruso?
I want to say almost nothing changes because the fact of the matter is Connor was already heavily involved with everything that was going on with linebacker recruiting under Tom Allen. Now, Allen goes without saying with his background in linebacker and knowing what he wants in his defense overall. He played a pretty important part in formulating that linebacker board. It is solely Connor's now. So, him and Jim Knowles are aligned in what they're looking for at linebacker. We've seen even, a little bit of a change in the sense that Caden Gebhardt was a top linebacker target for Penn State under Tom Allen. Now he's more of a safety target. So you see the shift. You see the little bit of tweaks and tinkers that are being made now that it's Connor's room solely. It's his board solely. But, returns on Connor from a recruiting perspective have always been pretty good. He's played some really important roles in securing commitments. He was big with Anthony Specca. He was big with Alex Tesh. So the fact of the matter is I just don't feel a whole lot changes. I think Connor's already been a really important part of Penn State's linebacker recruiting. Again, now he's at the front and center 100%. So it's different in that regard. But behind the scenes, he was always front and center anyway, and the kids knew that, and they knew what the pecking order was and how important Connor was going to be in their careers when they got to Penn State from a developmental standpoint. He made a point of building strong relationships with all of these guys on the 26 board in previous cycles and in future cycles that we're going to be talking about in years to come as well. So it's not a situation where you're introducing a new position coach and you have to get his feet wet. He's already pretty entrenched. He's got a ton of familiarity with what's going on. He knows the recruiting philosophy, and that's a good thing for Penn State because you're coming up on spring ball, you're coming up on official visits. You want these kids to have clarity. You want them to have strong relationships with the guy they know is going to be their position coach at the next level. Connor's that guy, and with a lot of the names on Penn State's board, the relationships are where they need to be.
Two more things I'll add on Connor. It's not exactly as we've all made the point of. He's not emerging from the shadows here. He was the voice that Kobe King heard last year as the middle linebacker for Penn State, relaying the play call from Tom Allen, the defensive coordinator. The other point I'll make here is this is a room with Kobe King now, competing out at the combine, trying to make a case for his NFL draft stock. He's gone. So you've got Dom DeLuca, who's done it in a Penn State uniform, and Tony Rojas, who's done it. Everybody else has played some special teams. They've had a smattering of snaps, a lot of unknown commodities there. Dan Connor should have his head wrapped around the personnel already in that room as well as anybody on within this program right now. So versus bringing in some kind of outsider perspective in that linebacker room right now, I think that's also something worth pointing out. Tyler, we're going right back to you because the other staff move we wanted to address, Penn State had a need for a recruiting coordinator. They had Khalil Ahmed, someone who has great ties to New Jersey recruiting scene, briefly left last year for a Syracuse job, but came on back pretty fast. He has since moved on for a Temple job in the front office. James Franklin referred to it as a career opportunity for him to take the next step. But that left a need, and it certainly seemed to leave a need for an impact man in the Garden State, which is your wheelhouse. So they addressed it. Tell us how they did it and what it means for this recruiting staff.
Yeah, they brought in Nas Oliver, who is he was a title-winning high school coach up at Shabazz High in Newark. Pretty storied program. He took it over at a time where they were coming off, I believe, 4 straight losing seasons, which is not typical for that group. Oliver restored order quite quickly, won a sectional title in year 1, won another sectional title while moving up a classification in year 2, won, I believe his final record at Shabazz was 18-9 in 2 years, fell just short of an overall Group 2 state title in New Jersey. They fell 2 points short against Rumson Fairhaven High down the shore. But he coached some of North Jersey's top talent during his tenure at Shabazz. He sent Judah Pruitt, who's an offensive lineman, off to Boston College. Amari Gaines, one-time Penn State commit guy we've talked about a bunch. Oliver was his coach, and he set the suit up at Stanford. Zayden McDonald's a really talented safety in the 26 class who has an offer from Penn State and a bunch of other high-level Power 4 programs. Oliver was instrumental in his development. So you see a lot of traits of a high-level high school football coach. Now he's joining Penn State's recruiting department, really tied in North Jersey. Former St. Peter's Prep defensive back in Jersey City, went over to play his college ball at Tennessee, had a cup of coffee with the New York Giants during an off season. And really, he's young. He's really, really, from what I've gathered from his tenure at Shabazz, he brought a lot of energy and hunger to that job. He really wanted to get that program back on track. And I think if he comes to Penn State, and everything indicates that he will, he comes to Penn State with that same level of hunger to help Penn State's recruiting department function the best it could possibly function, this is going to be a really, really good hire. Now, I know everyone wants to hear, what's going to be the direct impact. We're going to be able to get in at these North Jersey schools now. We got Penn State fans asking that question on the board. We're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to see results before we evaluate. But what we do know right now is Oliver, well-respected in North Jersey circles. I think it's going to be well-received within the tri-state area. And again, he's a charismatic guy. He understands what makes players tick. He understands what makes kids tick. It wouldn't surprise me at some point down the road if he becomes an on-field coach. I think that's how positively some people speak of him as a football mind. And I think he's a really quality addition to this recruiting department. Replacing Khalil Ahmad, wanted to get a guy in Jersey. I'm not sure Penn State could have done any better than Nas Oliver when it comes to that. He's got that juice to him, the kind of juice you want in a state that it's pretty popular with talented players, especially in his neck of the woods in North Jersey.
He seems like a personality fit for what they call the kennel,
Yeah.
I believe, with Kenny
Yeah,
Sanders
he
and
is.
Alan Zamaitis and Slim. These guys have been around. I mean, everything kind of seems like it's going to check out in terms of meshing, and we'll see what it means for New Jersey recruiting, and you'll certainly be the first to tell us over at Lions247.com. A former New Jersey high school standout and now a former Penn State Nittany Lion is where we head toward next, and that's Smith Vilbert. We thought we were really beyond the point where we'd have any subtractions from the roster heading towards spring ball, which is now less than a full month away. But as winter workouts got underway, Smith Vilbert disappeared from the roster, entered the transfer portal. So he will pursue a 7th season elsewhere. According to national recruiting analyst and portal expert Brian Doan, he says that there is a coast-to-coast interest right now in Smith Vilbert. Sounds like he's going to be able to command a pretty strong NIL market. Now, our understanding was last year, coming off a season in which he did not even play a down, that Vilbert had a bit of a transfer market brewing for himself. Penn State valued him. That was represented in him staying on campus. And ultimately, he played in all 16 games at a position where they needed him to be a two-deep contributor. And Daniel, with him removed from the equation, he's somebody that we've talked about has that body type and the skill set that we've heard from within facilities repeatedly. Could be a defensive tackle for you if you need to. Can certainly handle the defensive end role. And everyone's always saying you haven't quite seen the best of Vilbert. Even though he's 24, 25 years old, wherever he is now, there's still more gas in that, more gas in that tank. And there's been a lot of questions about, can he ultimately go and be a productive professional player for years as he maybe takes advantage of a late opportunity here in his college career. It won't happen suddenly in State College. So assess for us a little bit the removal of Smith Vilbert from that equation where you've already lost Abdul Carter, and ultimately what that means going into spring ball and what Deion Barnes needs to find.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a twist for February and our off seasons, but I think that when you look at this defensive end group, it opens up opportunity, and someone is going to need to step up. I think that you bring Denied Enna Sutton back, which put that one in pen. Sharpie, we all know what you're going to get out of him and the type of impact that he can make. But opposite him, there's a lot of guys who have question marks, a lot of guys who have the opportunity to step up. We know that Zariah Fisher is someone that the people in the building like, someone who has good potential, but he's someone that is coming off an injury. So what are we going to see from him over the course of a complete season? And then you have a ton of young guys who have either been behind the scenes, redshirting, working through injuries. We talked to Malachi Williams and Jalen Harvey at that availability earlier this month. We saw Max Granville get some reps in that, in the Abdul Carter role in the Fiesta Bowl after Carter went out. Mason Robinson is someone who was injured behind the scenes and we didn't see last year. So there's just a lot of different guys that you can combine to fill the spot, a lot of different guys who can have the opportunity to compete, but you don't entirely know what you're going to have. And so I think that this spring is really, really important for how this comes together. See what you have, see what you need. Anai White is another addition where you kind of don't know what you're going to get out of that because of injuries, not playing that much. We know that he's someone who, coming out of high school, had a really high ceiling. It's 3 years later, 4 years later, what does that look like now? What can he bring? So I think if you're Deion Barnes, you have options and there's opportunity for these players. It comes down to who is taking that big leap forward, who is going to put themselves in a position where they can not only get onto the field, but stay on the field and contribute over the course of the Big Ten schedule. It's definitely a wrench thrown in the plans right now, I think, and it shifts the average age in that room a ton when you talk about all the redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores that Deion Barnes has. But it's going to make for a pretty interesting competition and it adds a little bit of an uncertainty for spring ball.
As some background here, Smith Vilbert was among those players who back in January, the week following the Orange Bowl, put it out there. They were staying around for 2025. In his case, that meant a 7th year. You go back to 2022, mysterious absence throughout that regular season, although he was practicing with the team, ultimately gets to play in the Rose Bowl to finish things off. And then what we were expecting to be kind of a big finish to his career in 2023, he misses that entire season because of an injury, while preparing for preseason, for spring ball, and that's wiped away from him. So he gets back last year. He's a key role player, and now he moves forward. And Tyler, a name that Daniel mentioned, and by the way, we saw Smith Vilbert in team facilities last Saturday. I should say that, and I heard some teammates actually joking around that he was going to give the best tour of anyone to these Thon families because he's been around the program as long as anyone, but no longer calling the Lasch Building home. Max Granville, Daniel brought him up. He's a guy that you covered pretty closely, Tyler, during his recruitment. We didn't expect to be talking about Granville as a returning member of this roster in 2025. We thought he'd be a freshman member. Instead, he has that reclassification within a few days of preseason camp last year, comes to campus. We hear throughout, I think even on the record from James Franklin, that he's a guy they thought, if needed, could burn red shirt. Ultimately wasn't necessary. He was kind of waiting in the wings in the biggest stage of the season as Abdul Carter is banged up. Carter is able to play through that injury. So Max Granville, it's still more of a tease than tangible evidence to this point. But can you take us through what made him such a special prospect and a guy that a lot of teams across the country were coveting in the state of Texas?
Well, first off, I mean, that decision for him to reclass and enroll early and be part of the team last fall, it's looking even more important for Penn State now because he's got a whole year of development and a whole year of understanding how Penn State does things under his belt, and that's only going to help him in 2025. He's playing with a lot of the traits that we saw in his high school tape down in Texas. Elite first step, really good athlete. He's got the bend to be a high-level pass rusher in the Big Ten. His high school tape is interesting in the sense that he did a couple different things. He played off the ball at linebacker sometimes, and there was plenty of edge tape as well. And Penn State prioritized him differently than some of the other schools involved in his recruitment. Even Oklahoma was looking at him more as, kind of a hybrid guy, could give you some reps as a stand-up linebacker, playing a more traditional drop in a coverage role, make use of that athleticism. And, Penn State, they'll pick and choose their spots with Granville to take advantage of the athleticism he does possess. But when it comes to a natural pass rusher skill set, Granville has everything Deion Barnes was looking for during the 25 cycle, and Barnes got the chance to coach it up a year earlier. The one thing off the field that has always stood out about Granville is just the work ethic, the discipline. You guys have seen that throughout his freshman season. He's a very regimented person. I think that comes from the bloodlines with his dad playing in the NFL. His mother was an athlete as well. So he's very locked in on what exactly he needs to do to be the best player he can be. And in that way, he really blended into Penn State's culture well. Some young guys, they come in and they got to adjust to how much they have to work. Max Granville, nope. He was already used to it. He was ready to grind. Did that throughout his first year in State College. He's a guy I'm looking at ready to take that next step next season.
Well, Daniel wrote about this during the Orange Bowl when we thought we might see Max Granville on a bigger stage. He's got a tattoo that he has put on himself since he got to campus. He didn't put it on himself. He went to a tattoo artist. But it says now, and it's kind of stylized like a digital clock. And it's right there, like right where your wristwatch would be. So every time you look down, I think it's on his left hand. Every time he looks down at it, he's going to see that word now. And that really may be the case, and it might need to be the case. And before we get too far away from this topic, I want to go back to you, Tyler, because Jalen Harvey and Malachi Williams are guys that Daniel and I just got a chance to just spend some time with, catching up with them and some of those second-year players over at team facilities. But they've added 30-plus pounds, each of them, I believe, over the course of their first year on campus. Harvey, maybe not so much. I think he was a little heavier when he got to campus. He's kind of remained and sustained in a similar weight. But I know Malachi is up to like 250 from maybe 220, maybe less than that. Are these two guys now, year two, are they trending as you anticipated? And if you had to kind of prognosticate a bit, where are they in the pecking order when it comes to getting into practice mode again?
They are trending as expected. Maybe Harvey more so than Williams. You saw him a little bit towards the end of last year, and he escaped what looked like was going to be a pretty, significant injury against Purdue. So that was a big that's big for Penn State because now you're going to have him in 25. But Harvey's interesting to me because you mentioned the weight, and it's good because I was going to touch on that. He got to campus around, I believe he was big. He was already a big kid. And there were some questions about, getting in that strength and conditioning program, pack on some pounds. Could he be a guy who maybe, adds enough weight to be a hybrid? He could give you some reps inside and pass rushing situations as well. But he's checking in around 250 right now. So he's looking like a true D end for Penn State. And, a lot of the similar traits to Granville coming out of Quince Orchard High down in Maryland. Good first step, physical kid. I think he's ready to take that next step. The reviews have been pretty positive. Williams has always been a high-level athlete. That was what Penn State's really the interest came from that. And he's still developing as a natural pass rusher. He was a highly productive high school player down in the Philly area. I think Harvey, I still look at Harvey more, but I think Williams, given the upside he carries, I could see both those guys factoring into that pass rusher situational role type rotation for Deion Barnes in 25. Because look, you got to replace Smith Vilbert somehow. You've got young guys in the room who can play. Now they just need the reps to show that. Harvey showed a little bit towards the end of last year. I think he's headed in the right direction. Same deal with Williams, and we know what Granville is. Well, we kind of know what Granville is. We're going to learn more about what he is, but I think the returns on that are going to continue to be positive.
Tyler, you've got as good of grips on Penn State's transfer portal outlook as anybody on our staff at Lions 24/7. Does the removal of Smith Vilbert from 2025 plans alter the way you view Penn State maybe attacking this spring transfer portal window, which, unlike the earlier one, is not a big month-long endeavor? It's about a week. Do you see this being a position of serious interest, factoring in that they already have an White, former top 100 prospect from Texas A&M, who had some development to make here on campus? They brought him in as an edge rusher type already.
Yeah, I do, but at the same time, I don't stray away from the notion that Penn State's going to continue to be selective in the portal. They're not going to look at this move and be like, oh, okay, we need to go out and do something in the spring. That 100% needs to happen because the player just might not present himself to the staff. This spring window is so different in that regard. The winter window, guys, they roll into the portal, and as time goes on, it's a pretty deep group you get to pick and choose from. The spring window is completely different. It's shorter. Not as many guys are going to make the jump. And a lot of the guys who do make the jump, you really got to wonder, are they even worth exploring from a talent level perspective? Are they fit from an off-the-field perspective? So there's a lot that goes into what makes a transfer portal player a true Penn State target. And there's no telling if that player is going to present himself in the spring. What we know at this point is there's faith in the young guys in the room. So that's always important to note because you're not going to dive headfirst in the portal if you are sold on what those young guys could bring to the table. Spring ball will provide some clarity in that regard for James Franklin, Deion Barnes, and the rest of the staff. And if a player presents himself in the portal where the staff looks at him and says, oh, okay, this guy can really help us, let's go try and make a move on him, they will. And they'll do that at any position. Wide receiver is always a talking point. D-line, they'll do it anywhere they can. But it's definitely, I think, a little bit more now. There's going to be some more looking around going on.
You guys want to hear something really stupid? The spring portal window is April 16th through the 25th. Penn State spring game, of course, is April 26th. So the portal will be closed by the time Penn State closes its spring practice game. I don't know if it's as stupid as your backup quarterback needing to hit the portal during a playoff run, but it's pretty stupid. And that's where we are in the college football calendar. Let's go to the winter workouts, because before we get to spring practice, we got winter workouts. It's a little bit less on the plate of these players this time around. James Franklin said it'll be a 6-session schedule versus the previous, which I believe was 8 to 10 of these winter workout sessions. That's because of the lengthy season not ending until mid-January. And Daniel, let's go right back to defensive end, because as we monitor through 2 of these sessions, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, each of Penn State's position coaches, they've been doing this year by year by year. They put out their top competitor of the day. It doesn't mean here's who's starting at my position. It's not a depth chart look, but it's saying here's the guy who crushed today's workout. He's getting some praise. And sometimes, well, often we tend to read far too into these, and it happens on our message board as well. But we're going to have some fun with it. And I think first things first, we got to address that on day one of these workouts, Daniel, 2 players got the nod who were not available for Penn State last season on defense due to injuries. One is redshirt freshman Kari Jackson. I wrote a story about him earlier this month on Lions247.com. He's missed the last 2 seasons, going back to his high school senior year because of injury issues. They certainly need depth at linebacker. The other is Zariah Fisher. Last year, he missed the entire season due to an injury suffered earlier in the year. And he's a couple years removed from missing most of the 2022 season. He is a 6th-year senior at the defensive end spot that we just addressed. So to see those 2 names pop up, it was hard not to shift your eyes in that direction on Tuesday.
Yeah, it sounds like to you guys that we haven't seen or heard much about giving a good first impression as they enter this portion of the calendar for Penn State. We talked about Fisher earlier. That defensive end spot, there's an opportunity there for him. We've heard a lot of good things about the work he did at defensive end, making that switch from linebacker earlier in his career. I think we've heard good things about his mindset and coming back from these injuries, working through these setbacks, and Penn State is going to need him. Tyler just sort of talked about it in terms of banking on these young guys to step up. But that's, you're putting a lot of eggs in that basket. Having a veteran who's been around, knows how this stuff works, I think can be a big benefit. So it's a good sign for Zariah Fisher. Kari Jackson, it's kind of a wild card in terms of what he is as a player. Like you said, he hasn't played in a long time. There's opportunity at linebacker. Things might look a little bit different under Jim Knowles. You're looking for guys to step up, fill these different roles. And so I think that this is a good opportunity for him. When you talk about coming off of an injury, having a new coach new system, opportunity for him to show what he can do and find a home. So we talk about these winter workouts, reading into them too much. I think the one thing that I like to take away from it is at least who is making an impression, who is getting noticed, who's building up equity in this area of it, and who is making first impressions. And I think when you talk about Fisher and Jackson, those are 2 guys that I think you put this in the positive column for them as we go into the offseason.
And sometimes you're reminded that not everything is perfectly linear at this level. A guy like Alex Birchmeier pops up as Phil Troutwine's pick here after the second session on Thursday. A lot of people have already forgotten about Alex Birchmeier. He's a former top 100 prospect. He's been on campus a couple of years, but because he hasn't broken through and played here and there last year, special teams, reserve player on the interior, but Phil Troutwine giving him a tip of the cap here. You just take note of that kind of thing. Now, what I think is probably going to raise the most eyebrows of everybody when they sort through the picks from the staff this week is going to be over in the receiver room, where Marcus Hagans looked in the direction of 2 transfer pickups. First, it was former USC receiver Kyron Hudson. Then it was former Troy receiver Devontae Ross. So, Tyler, you've talked about these guys with us quite a bit. Is talking about putting eggs in the basket. Are you getting the sense there are maybe few too many eggs in the basket of counting on these transfer receivers? And is it warranted based on what you're hearing? Because again, this room returns only one player, Liam Clifford, who has even 10 catches in a Penn State uniform.
Yeah, I mean, the early returns have definitely been positive. These guys have gotten to work and they've hit the ground running in that regard. But the eggs are definitely in the basket of these guys coming in and, being impact players in that wide receiver room. It goes into the conversation of what Penn State is going to do at the position in the spring portal window. I expect them to be active there. Now, I'm not going to rehash what I just said about, being selective and whatnot, but that's going to apply to wide receiver recruiting during the spring window as well. But when it comes to the guys currently in the room, there is a lot of attention on Hudson and Ross because those were the headline winter portal window acquisitions at the position. Ross is coming off a big season in the Sun Belt. Hudson was what he was at USC. He was an impactful part of a very talented wide receiver room. So there is internal confidence that those guys are going to be able to join this Penn State wide receiver group and be impact players and function as high-level targets for Drew Aller throughout the 2025 season. The fact that they've hit the ground running and are doing well behind the scenes right now is definitely encouraging. But it's going to be a combination of those guys, shouldering the load and the younger guys in the room stepping up. But there's a lot being placed on the shoulders of those two. I believe just given the current state of the room coming off a 2024 season where the wide receiver position was a big talking point, wide receiver play was a huge talking point, they're going to be pretty much all eyes on Hudson and Ross to kind of help rectify that situation in 25. I think it's something they're shouldering quite well. They know the responsibility that they're taking on joining this Penn State wide receiver depth chart. And based on conversations I've had about, the mental makeup of those guys, not what they bring on the field, but off the field, they're ready to be that kind of a guy for Penn State in the passing game. So for me, that's a huge plus, because you're walking into a situation that it's not an easy one. This team has national title aspirations. You've got to come in and be an impact player. Both of these guys, they committed to Penn State, signed with Penn State, well aware of that, and they're doing well with it so far.
Ross coming off a 1,000-yard season at Troy. Kyron Hudson was a starter for USC, had some highlight grabs along his last season with the Trojans, caught a touchdown against Penn State out in Los Angeles last year. I know I sent you guys a rundown breaking this down a particular way, but I'm going to combine some stuff a little bit so we can get to some combine points before we wrap up this episode. But Daniel, 2 defensive backs on this squad go 2 for 2 in their position room and getting these competitor of the day nods at safety and cornerback. At safety, it's 5th-year senior Zachy Wheatley, and at cornerback, it's junior Elliott Washington. What's your initial reaction to that?
I mean, I think with Wheatley, he's someone that we're really looking to be a big-time player, big-time impact player, a leader on the back end of the defense. He was the second guy after Drew Aller to announce his intentions to come back for this season. We saw what he did when KJ Winston went down, how he closed the year in the CFP. I think he was someone where the arrow was really pointed up for him as the season ended, and carrying that over in the winter workouts, picking up where he left off. I think that's a big positive for him, especially when you look at the role that he is going to be expected to play, both from a tangible and intangible perspective. Washington, I think, is interesting when you talk about how that room is going to shift. There's a starting job open with Jalen Kimber moving on to the NFL. I think you kind of pencil in AJ Harris in that other starting corner job based on how he played last year. We still don't really know what it's going to look like in terms of how the nickel is going to be used. Is it going to be the lion? All of that sort of stuff. So there is some opportunity there. Washington was someone who was getting an opportunity over the course of the year. We saw his role expanding a little bit, got an interception, made some plays, but then he got banged up against Purdue, and we didn't see him that much after that. So I think for him, going into winter, you see a bounce back. Someone who didn't necessarily close the season in a prominent role, bouncing back, putting his best foot forward to start, especially in a room that we know is so competitive, and that we know that if you show up, you're going to play, and you're going to get opportunities. So I think for Washington, that this is a good positive to start this chapter of the offseason.
Yeah, Elliott Washington, Zion Tracy burned red shirts a couple of years ago. We saw Zion Tracy really step up into a starting position late last season, year 3 for both those guys, big time factors. Cam Miller has moved on. He's now at Rutgers to close out his career as a transfer. Let's jump into the NFL Combine. 5 players invited. I mean, it would have been a much larger number. Let's face it, if Penn State didn't have this roster retention success in the winter, and we probably wouldn't be talking about their 2025 ambitions quite the same here as well. But that list is what it is, and it's led by Abdul Carter, Tyler Warren, routinely now projected inside the top 10 overall for the NFL draft. And Carter being a potential number 1 overall pick. The last time that happened for Penn State back in 2000 with Courtney Brown going to the Browns. That's also the last time you had 2 Penn State players go in the top 10 together, because LeVar Arrington came off the board at number 2 that year. And so with Abdul Carter, we got a few things to update. Daniel, you've been kind of on the Carter beat for us this week since coming back from vacation. Let us know the latest. And by the way, shaping up to be a pretty damn big pro day here in State College. I'm going to venture to guess this will be the biggest pro day in terms of spotlight coverage on it, the amount of NFL execs that are in town and coaches since we had Saquon Barkley doing drill work back in 2018.
Yeah, Abdul Carter, I think he just tweeted a little bit ago that people got to get their popcorn ready for March 28th in Haluba Hall. I mean, it's going to be a big deal because as we established, Carter not working out at the Combine this week because of the shoulder injury that he suffered in the Fiesta Bowl, and then he played through in the Orange Bowl. Carter met with the media on Wednesday morning. Shout out to Steve Hellwagon of Bucknuts for getting us audio and video of Carter's availability out in Indianapolis. And Carter touched on the common themes that we've heard from him. He's someone who takes the tack that I'm going to do whatever I can to help my team win. I think I deserve to be the number 1 pick. I think I'm the best player in the country. Yeah, all the normal, the confidence, everything we've come to associate with Abdul Carter. He said he was about 90% healthy and was looking forward to his pro day. Wednesday night, pretty late. I think I was actually, I just brushed my teeth and was getting ready for bed after the basketball game. And Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport of ESPN and NFL Media, respectively, both tweet out statements from Drew Rosenhaus about how during medical testing, they found a, quote, stress reaction in Abdul Carter's right foot. And he had two options. One option was surgery, which would put him, I think, put him out for 8 weeks. The other option was just not doing anything, continuing a pace, going through pro day, that sort of thing. Fast forward to Thursday morning, Drew Rosenhaus, tells national media that doctors advised Carter that he does not need surgery and that he can continue as he was planning. So that puts Carter on track to participate in pro day, which is a month from Friday. So in 4 weeks, he'll be out on the field at Huluba Hall. So a little bit of a roller coaster from someone who was not going to work out to begin with in Indianapolis. But it sounds like things are, there is a trajectory now for Carter's offseason, and it features working out at pro day and putting himself in position to be that number one pick. It's going to be, I think, really intriguing to follow. A lot of it, there hasn't been too much excitement during the pre-draft process. I know that we've had our share of high quality prospects, but no one in this number one range, and no one who I think had the profile and personality of Abdul Carter. He's posting Darth Vader on Twitter again, so he knows what this is. He knows what he's doing, and it's going to be a fun next 4 weeks. And the draft is 2 weeks, less than 2 months away now. Yeah. So we are we're off and running.
Yeah, I don't remember a Penn State player in my coverage tweeting out that they were going to be the number one pick 2 months before the draft while dealing with multiple injury questions. But that's who Abdul Carter is. He's not lacking for confidence, and I suspect he will make franchises pay if they pass on him at the top of that board. We will be there in coverage. I think Tyler Calvaruso is going to join us for that coverage as well. But finishing with the combine here, there are 3 other Nittany Lions out there involved in Indianapolis, and or 4 others, I should say. Quick note on Tyler Warren. Not going to be participating in drills, according to a report from Fox Sports' Jordan Schultz. That's not necessarily all that notable because I think he's proven so much on the football field. But we're wondering, we don't have an answer to yet, I believe, is whether he will participate in drills during pro day, as we're expecting from Abdul Carter. Tyler Warren will go through the interview gauntlet out there with a bunch of franchises and try to make a strong impression that way. We're not hearing that that's anything related to an injury. It's just become a more popular kind of avenue for players to take if they're at the top of that board. They've proven a lot. They don't go out there and they don't go through all that drill work sometimes. And Tyler Warren seemingly going to take that approach. He also, according to Schultz of Fox Sports, is invited to Green Bay to attend the NFL draft. And that's notable because this year, only 8 to 10 NFL draft prospects are expected to be there on location, invited by the NFL. I think there's a pretty good chance you could have Penn State with 2 of those seats. So we'll see what happens there. 3 other guys, though, as I mentioned, there's so much attention on those top 2, and rightly so. But Kobe King, KJ Winston, Jalen Reed, defenders who've done a bunch of good things for the Nittany Lions on the field. It's been a little bit longer since KJ Winston did that, since he missed the final 14 and a half games of his last season with Penn State. But start with you, Tyler. We'll go to Daniel. We'll finish out the show this way. Who are you most intrigued by from that trio that's not residing in the spotlight in Indianapolis?
For me, it's KJ Winston for a couple different reasons. One, I want to see where he's at coming off that ACL injury. The other one being, it's always interesting to see how these guys fare in the interview process when they're coming off an injury. Teams want to pick their brain and see where they're at mentally because, the unfortunate fact is there are some guys who suffer a significant knee injury like that. It takes them a little bit to get over the mental hurdle of being full go and being able to function fully on that knee. Everyone recovers differently, not just physically, but mentally as well. So I think that's going to be an important part of the interview process for Winston. Teams picking his brain, seeing where he's at from that perspective, and also from a schematic perspective. How does he feel he's going to fit in secondaries in the next level? So that's why he has my attention. But these guys flying under the radar, I think they all carry a storyline of intrigue of at least some sort.
Daniel, how about you?
Yeah, just one update on Winston. It looked like Max Ralph from Penn Live is out there, and he said that Winston is planning on running his 40 at Pro Day. I think if all goes well, I think that's the wording that's out there. So
stack it on top of the intrigue for Pro Day, right? Like KJ
Yeah.
Winston's going to make his big return and try to impress people. There's a lot going on, folks. It's going to be all hands on deck coverage in about a month.
Definitely. And then you're going to have the guys who didn't get invited to the combine getting the chance,
big list,
which is, yeah. So, I mean, I'll go with Jalen Reed for this exercise. I've written a ton about him over the past year. He's someone who had a really interesting role in this Penn State defense, someone I thought took a big leap forward. And still, he entered the year overshadowed by KJ Winston. I think over the course of the year, there was still a shadow by KJ Winston not being there that he was working under. So this is an opportunity for him to step out into the spotlight and put some stuff, do some drills, put himself on the radar. Maybe some people who in the draft industrial complex who weren't as familiar with him. I also think he's another interesting one from the interview process perspective, because in talking with us, he is very intelligent, football savvy. At the same time, didn't really have a filter, was always really honest with us about what was going on and his feelings on things. And I'm interested in how that personality comes through when he's in front of national media at the podium or in a breakout session in the convention center, and then also behind the scenes, how that's coming through in that football IQ with NFL teams in those meetings. And so I think that he's someone who coming out of Indianapolis, we could hear that his stock went up. He's in that day 2 mix. He's someone that teams came away really impressed with. So big week for all these guys, but I think Jalen Reed is someone who can really make a move.
24/7 Sports came out with a list of 10 sleepers for the NFL draft going into this, and they did list Jalen Reed among that. I guess I'll close it out with Kobe King, almost 100 tackles last year. I know I'd feel a lot better about this 2025 Nittany Lions defense if he had come back as a redshirt senior, but he decided to take his shot at the pro level. He's someone who I think got progressively more explosive early on in his career. I think you wondered about his ability to be more of a sideline guy, a guy who could be an effective blitzer, but he really changed his configuration of a body. I don't know if he's still on a pescatarian diet, but he was only eating seafood for a while there, and talked about maximizing his body. And I think it was reflected in his play in 2024, getting after the quarterback on occasion. And ultimately he saw his brother go through a really rough draft process last year. And Kalen, who left eligibility in State College to turn pro, we all thought he was going to be a first-round cornerback early in his career. Didn't work out that way. He goes late round 7, right? So what did he learn from his brother during that process? What did he learn across the way? And I have that right. Kalen was drafted at the end of that draft.
7th round.
Yeah. So, I mean, either way, a pretty brutal, entrance to the professional football world. So I'm curious what Kobe can take into this, and want to know what those explosive testing numbers, do they lend a little credence to what I say, or do they give him a little more work to make up, more ground to make up come pro day? We'll keep tabs on that. Again, I'm going on vacation, but Daniel's going to be keeping tabs on that. He'll have you covered on whatever remains of this college basketball season for Penn State. And we'll find out what their postseason fortunes may or may not look like. And Tyler Calvaruso, as the recruiting world continues to turn, he will have you covered at Lions247.com. Guys, fun, comprehensive conversation here to kind of set the stage for us to take a week away from the pod. I think it's the first time we won't be sitting down to record episodes since like the first week of July last year. So thanks to both of you for helping the machine keep rolling forward. It's time to pause for a moment, but we will be back in mid-March with plenty to talk about.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yep, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
For now, on behalf of those guys, I'm Tyler Donahue. This has been the Lions 24/7 podcast.